our another new episode, and I will discuss. We will discuss about the future of work. Professor David Smith is a world famous speaker, and he is a futuristics, and he gonna discuss about the future of work. Professor David Smith, World Talent Economy Forum. Definitely, we do focus on futuristic activities, and recently we are observing artificial intelligence and it playing a major role. On the other hand, we are working in the emerging economy. Still, we are not like North America or Europe. So we need a lot of progression. So what is your advice when we discuss about future of work and how you want to analyze to this topic?
Well, Sharif, you have chosen a very complicated topic on this one because it has changed tremendously over the last 5 years, so much so. Um, One of the defining things that has affected the future work is that uh, the pandemic really changed what we see with the future work and what is happening with the future work. We have increased digitalization, like we've talked about before. We're seeing connectivity increasing dramatically at a global level. Not only speeds, but where people can connect from and the quality of their connections. The quality of the connections is a cat and mouse game because as more people get online and they start to do more, it costs them to do many other different things, which then will slow the network down some. The other thing we see is we see robotics beginning to work. We see cognitive tools. We're seeing new talent models. We're seeing the rapid rise of artificial intelligence. Uh, we're seeing the gig economy. We're seeing a circular economy, all coming back to really impact the future of work and how it's going. And while no one can really predict the future of work clearly, we do see a lot of the elements of where it's headed and what we're doing and how that can be used. And we know that all these trends, plus the impacts from the pandemic, are going to really go and change where they are. So we see a lot of large organizations beginning to say, we need to really look at um, what are we going to do with our employees, how we're going to look at work. We're also seeing it varies a lot on the labor demand, the mix of occupations. What are the workforce skills there? What are the new skills that need to be learned? And really, what country are we in? Because if you look at the countries with diverse economic and labor market models, uh, it really shifts and lets you go and think about the future work. And also the demographics. I'm going to come back to demographics in greater detail in just a minute or two. But for example, recently McKinsey released some figures on the future of work. And 1 in 16 workers will have to switch occupations by 2030 because of the changes in work models, technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, and others. And just to kind of put that in perspective, that's over 150 million workers, and that the pandemic did accelerate these workforce transitions. And job growth will be more concentrated in high skilled jobs. For example, healthcare, science, technology, engineering, uh, where middle and low skilled jobs such as production work, food services, office support roles, they're going to decline. And we're seeing some job categories because of digitalization and e-commerce uh, dramatically grow, such as warehouse workers. We see investments in green economy. We see the aging population, which is going to drive increased demand for nurses, health aides, and teachers and training are all going to grow. but we're seeing more and more types of jobs that are going to be at risk, such as checkout uh, people, clerks, robotics used in food preparation, many simple warehouse opportunities, and others. So those will be really things that we're seeing happening there, and how they're changing and how that's going to work through it. You know, there are so many different scenarios we can talk about and how those are going to interplay that we could go on for a while about this, but it has really changed. You know, if we begin to look pandemic, we knew that uh, we were going to continue a path and just have to take into account generational skills and like that. But we saw, because of the pandemic, supply chains broke up, working from home, no one went into the office. We saw telehealth flares. We saw many different things. So the questions that companies and governments have been asking for the last several months is that now that COVID is, well, I'm going to say this word, morphing to where it looks like it's under control to some extent, not really. The companies and governments are saying, what's now? What does normal look like going forward? And we need to really look at it in a full context of the ecosystem. And that another survey recently of looked at workers, and nearly 9 out of 10, or about 87%, said they do not want to work from the office full time. And almost half of those would be happy to never set foot in an office again. And almost half again said they prefer a hybrid model that splits time between office and home. And one of the statistics out of another survey I read that is shocking to me, totally shocking to me, is that this is in Forbes, that 71% of workers said they would choose to be able to work from anywhere over a job promotion or a compensation increase, so more salary, didn't have to return to the office the way it was before. And a lot of them have just gotten used to it. So the challenges of going from a traditional office environment pre-pandemic to where we are now, it's really one that we have many challenges still to work with, and how we're going to handle that. We see the future of work just dramatically changing, and my feeling is we're not going back to how it was before, and we're going to have to reimagine the future of work. We're going to have to reimagine uh, what it is. So we saw things that we doubted before. We doubted telehealth. We doubted whether we could run colleges classes remotely, whether we can do K through 12 school remotely, but we did. We began to look at a new era, so that because we had to reconsider the way things work, we need to look at how do we re-architect it, and the trends have just been so amazing that it's surprised most of the people uh, in the business who have tried to forecast this over the years. Uh, I fortunately was the keynote speaker at a conference at Stanford about 5 years ago now, talking about the future of work and the big things that will be happening. One of the big problems I presented there, which is still a problem today, even with us looking at this, is the fact that today we have 5 generations of employees in the workforce at the same time. And with the shortage of work in many areas of workers, I actually think you're going to see 6 generations. come back into the workforce because we're seeing so many people come out of retirement to fill job openings. That is yet another one. Some of the things you have to look at in the future of work when you look at from a generational standpoint is that all of our generations like to receive our information in different ways. We like to communicate different. We have a different view of what we expect out of a corporation. Uh, maybe, for example, maybe many baby boomers, of many people from the older, greater generation, uh, and many Gen X, we expect the company to provide us all the tools we need, our computers, our phones, all of that. But if I look at millennials and particularly Gen Z, they want to use their own stuff as opposed to have the company provide it. Uh, they also begin to want to go and be able to, like I said, not have to be in an office. They want more freedom. Uh, They want to be able to dramatically adapt their schedules to where if they want to work at 10 o'clock at night versus 10 o'clock in the morning, they want to be able to do that. And that's going to change a lot of the future of work is trying to get these multiple generations to work together in this type of way. Um, and, and employers must rethink their approaches, or they're going to lose these whole classes of employees to other employers that offer more flexibility. And the businesses today and the governments today must tap into the real things of digitalization, the power of people, the power of the different processes that have been in place in technology, and these have to become more human centric. The future of work, I like to say, is you, and you're the human centric part there. And you need to also look at how to give a user experience to your people, to your team, to your employees, just like you have tried to do for a long time to your customers, because your employees are actually one of your most important customers in the future of work. And you have to begin to do this type of transformation to get into a new, more human centric work style, a more human centric worker, and more in human centric workspaces, whether it's in a traditional office or whether it's virtual, and whether you can do virtual on demand spaces is just one of the new trends. How do you train and upscale your employees and particularly grow new leadership in this hybrid environment or a purely remote environment? And how do you judge productivity? Um, one of the things I always love to do is manage by wandering around. And that's really hard when all your employees are working remotely, and particularly if they're working remotely at home. And then you see uh, a new emphasis on employee health and well being because, again, you're in this hybrid environment. And you're going to have a global, diverse, and very, very distributed workforce. And they're going to be accustomed to working from anywhere at any time. And, you know, you're even seeing government agencies having to adapt to this more flexible work model, including hybrid workspaces, working remotely at home, satellite offices, temporary offices, and for example, co-sharing workspace. And how do you navigate the global, diverse, and distributed teams, particularly on an international basis with very different rules? And how can I use automation, robotics? How can I use artificial intelligence? How can I use cognitive computing? How can I use a circular economy to begin to look at this? And really, I'll stop in a minute since I now see we have others on the line with us. How do we look at the cyber threat? Both the cybersecurity, privacy, protecting the intellectual property of the organization, and others like that. Those are going to be all tremendous challenges in the future of work. So, Sharif, that's kind of my intro.
Thank you. Mr. Dan, what you want to share about the future of work?
Well, it's good to be back, Sharif. How's my sound? Is it okay? Uh, okay, good, good. I haven't had a chance to test it. Yeah, David, you always have the great executive briefing level take on every topic of the day. It's so good to, even though I joined a little late, it's so good to hear your contributions. You know, when I think about work, I think about this statistic that's come out recently that says 50% of the jobs are at risk of being displaced by artificial intelligence in the next 5 years. And, you know, we could either look at this as a threat or an opportunity, because there's another interesting statistic that says 70% of Americans hate their jobs. So if we play this right, we could actually use this job displacement to get people transitioning from jobs that they hate to jobs that they love. Now, how do you get a job that you love? That's maybe the big question about the future of work. I think it was Ray Bradbury that said, you know, he discovered the library, dropped out of school, and got paid to play. Because, you know, when you discover what you love to do, you're just going to get paid to play. There won't be any so-called work anymore. At that point, it's just play. And, you know, the payment that you get from others is really just a counter of how much they value what you're doing. So you don't have to think of it in terms of money. And in fact, I think we are transitioning toward what some have called the Star Trek economy. If you remember in the Star Trek series, uh, especially in number 4, they're like, "Oh, this takes money. They use money here," you know, because in Star Trek they've got a future of kind of what the transhumanists are envisioning, of thriving abundance, where we have replicators. There's just so much superabundance that really people don't require money to make it through their day-to-day life. Now, our current economy has good and bad aspects. We're kind of tied to one value standard, which is the U.S. dollar, for better or for worse, is the global reserve currency, and everything's kind of pegged to that. But it's showing some maybe some weakness, that it'll be replaced by perhaps central bank digital currencies or other things. But there's a story that I like about a bunch of construction workers show up to do their job at a job site, and the boss says, "Guys, I have to send you all home. We ran out of inches." It's like, you can't run out of inches. Inches are just a measuring standard, and money is just a measuring standard. So there's lots of ways to create value exchanges without pegging it to one particular standard, like the dollar or like an inch. And you could use the metric system. You could use Bitcoin, blockchain. You could use barter. I mean, the first civilizations that were pre-agricultural actually spent about 2 or 3 hours hunting and gathering, and then they took the rest of the day off and made art and did fun stuff. And it was the advent of agriculture about 10,000 years ago that necessitated the kind of more drudgerous work day, where you had to have, you know, standing armies and grain silos and ways of tabulating the surpluses and the agricultural products. So I think we're on the threshold of moving to the next phase of civilization, where we're not tied to robotic, drudgerous tasks that machines can do better. And frankly, if a machine can do something better, why deprive a machine of the the satisfaction? And you know, really, our educational system was based on a Prussian military academy model, where people would be very able to be regimented. You know, you had grades, and you had rote memorization of tests. People trained to sit in one place, and when they hear a bell, they go to another place. I mean, it's very factory labor kind of training system. But what we need now are creative thinkers. We need generalists. We need people that are willing to follow their bliss, as Joseph Campbell, the philosopher, said was the thing to do. So, you are your own user experience, and you might as well get good at it. So don't do what you've been, trained to do. Be creative. Use critical thought processes. Find the work that you love, and society will love you for it. So that's my introductory thoughts on the future of work. Thanks, Sharif and David.
Yeah, Professor David Smith.
Chief, Daniel is right as we look at him. A lot of this is changing. A lot of it's going to continue to evolve as we're going here. And right now, I can tell you, for example, here in Austin, IBM has just purchased a very large multi-building building complex and plans to bring all their employees here in Austin back to the office. And you see others like Amazon and Google going the other approach, and they are selling their office space or subleasing their office space because they know their workers are not going to come back to the office. So you've got some of the betting on the two different sides here. And how is that going to go, and how is that going to pay back? But you have so many trends that we're looking at right now that are still developing, and we do not know quite where they are right now, because we've seen quiet hiring and quiet quitting hit kind of an all-time high, where we don't know what's the status of a lot of our employees. One of the real interesting statistics I've seen is companies that have installed monitoring software on people's computers at home who are supposed to be working from home. This monitoring software is actually showing in a full days of work on average, the employees are only on their computers for about 2 to 3 hours total. So what is happening to the other 5 or 6 hours of a standard workday? And how's that going? And is that is the productivity there, or how can you balance that with the compensation rates? Another thing we're seeing is that a lot of people are moving more to rural environments. They're moving away from the employment centers, and they're moving to places where there's a lower cost of living. Well, if you move away from a high cost of living location and are working remotely, does your salary stay the same? Or do you take a lower rate of compensation because your costs are lower? In the old days, the brick and mortar, that's kind of what would happen. But today, with these hybrid virtual work environments, is that true? What are we going to do with that? And, in today's labor market, we're seeing incentives, bonuses, compensation being put to hire new employees because of all the labor shortages. Well, is that compensation or those bonus fair to the employees that are established there and other ones? And we're also seeing a focus on diversity and targeted segments of the workforce. And again, why are these targeted segments getting things that you're not getting to other people? So those are some of the high level, real interesting challenges that I think we're working with. And, there's multiple ways to see it. Gartner and others have come out with some of these future trends, and some of them I agree with, some I don't. So, for example, some of the trends we see out of Gartner is, I've talked about the quiet hiring. It's really not working now. We're seeing more hybrid flexibility. But we're also seeing that management has changed, and management has to take a different way. And the future work trends are putting more pressure on management. It's also taking pressure off of management, because you're seeing there is a huge new emphasis on the social and emotional learning part and the mental health of employees. particularly in this hybrid work phase. And like I said earlier, some companies are pushing very aggressive going back into the office and others are not. But because of all these shifts, the whole cybersecurity and data privacy and employee privacy is taking a forefront. The fact that the companies are putting increased monitoring software on the computers, whether the company owns it or whether the individual owns it or not, really crosses the line sometimes into data privacy for the employee. Uh, we're also seeing that some of the uh, generational views, for example, particularly uh, Gen X, Gen Z, they have really soft skill gaps, and uh, it's harder to use your soft skills when you're in a remote environment than when you're in a physical environment, because particularly Gen Z has had a wide erosion of social skills because they were disrupted by the pandemic. They were disrupted by other social issues. And how do those work and how can that change? But all of these, particularly with the flexibility for the workers where they control their schedule, they want some stability, but they want extreme flexibility in the work schedule. So that's a one that just cannot be balanced well in a remote environment. And you need to begin to see how they do it. With all this remote working, though, again, a recent survey by Gartner, they said that over 60% of the employees who work at home, it says their direct manager is how they have connection to the corporate culture now, which when you were working in a physical environment, that was not the case. And you begin to see it. So how do we provide new training? How do we provide new education? How can we look at fixing this soft skill, really big shortfall, particularly of Generation Z? And and how do we look at bringing people into new positions that they weren't trained for because of all the labor shortages and all that, particularly as we take the five, or my view, even the six generations in the workforce and try to bring them back in. Now, what type of counseling do we need? How do we begin to look at diversity, equality, and inclusion, particularly with, again, a recent survey that 45% employees believe their organization diversity, equality, inclusion programs are divisive to the workforce. And 2 out of 5 employees, according to Gartner, and this is growing, feel alienated by, or even they resent their organization's DEI events, efforts and things. So that, particularly with the future work and the fact that we're in this big transformational trend now of do we work remotely? Do we work in the office? Is it a hybrid model? Those are going to be huge ones to overcome. Also, again, we're using all these new emerging technologies. We're using robotics. We're using AI. We're using AI assistants. We're using wearables. We're using Internet of Things everywhere to collect data on how we're working, but also on the employees' health, their mental health, uh, even their living conditions and family conditions, which is creating this huge privacy crisis I talked about. But it's something that corporations feel they need to do to manage and be productive for their shareholders. So God, we need to look at ways to look at how to balance these conflicting needs and how to work on it. So we really face really historic challenges with a competitive workforce. Uh, it's an exhausted workforce for going through the pandemic. And we need to look at how can we differentiate ourselves in the workforce to begin to do it, and how can we change the need for our communications approach and style? How can we fix the work-life balance because they are so blurred together? So, Sharif, these are a few of the many, many issues that we have to work through and settle as we look at the future work. And unfortunately, these are not black and white decisions. All of these have tons of gray in it. And it's really hard to navigate, even in one country, much less globally. And most companies, other than the personal service industry, are global at launch. So we have to deal with these on a global basis as well. So, Sharif, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Dan.
Yeah, another thing that I like about the opportunities with this changing nature of work is that we can start to go back to something which I would call the location value economy. If you look at the physical universe that we're in, every physical thing has value, and that value derives usually very strongly from where that thing is located in the universe. There's an old saying among real estate agents: three biggest things in real estate are location, location, location. Well, this is true of the whole idea of what's called geo-libertarianism or geoism, Georgism. There was a author in the last in the 1876 wrote a book. Henry George wrote his book Progress and Poverty: An Inquiry into the Nature of Poverty, Causes of Unemployment. And what he found was that throughout human history, you've got people that have wrongfully monopolized things like land and water, and they've used force, and they've killed people to get it, and they've said, okay, well, this is mine now, but look, you didn't create that river, you didn't create that continent or that peninsula that you're using. What you should do is pay a fair use tax on what you're using. The value of that location should be paid into the Commonwealth, and that would actually fund all of the things that we need to administer rights and responsibilities with. Even Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, said that a land value tax is the least bad tax. And this is a guy who's for like zero taxes, and when he was willing at one speech, he said, well, yeah, if you have to have taxes, that would be the fairest way to do it. And this can be done in such a way that it doesn't displace anyone. Think of an annual auction where you have the first dibs to pay for the location that you are already using or that you want to use. So I think we're going to see a transition away from monopolies by doing this, and this really fixes capitalism. This is something that both so-called capitalists and socialists can really agree on, is if we just treat things that we didn't create need to be paid for, and that payment needs to fund the Commonwealth of governance. And the things that people make, that's theirs. No questions asked. They get to keep what they make, but they're paying for what they take. So, it's a way of taxing bads, not goods. The power to tax is the power to destroy, and you don't want to tax things like people's productivity or their creation of value. That we want to encourage that, but we want to tax when people are unfairly monopolizing things that they didn't create. So that's kind of geo-libertarianism or geoism in a nutshell. So what happens if we transition to an economy like that? Well, I think people aren't going to be referred to as workers. When you think about the term worker, is a demeaning term. We're more than just workers. We're people who provide value in different forms. And there's an old book, I think it was called "Go Hire Yourself an Employer." I mean, if you just say, okay, I'm a worker, I'm worth $10 an hour, that's really demeaning your own value. It's kind of putting yourself in the context of being just a robot that is a wage slave, that you're just going to do something you don't really want to be doing, but you're willing to do it because you're going to get that hourly wage. I think the best kind of enterprise is the cooperative, employee-owned or associate-owned enterprise. There's actually a way to convert existing corporations that are owned from the top down into employee-owned, and see what happens when you do that is people are incentivized to create the most value they can because they know that they're going to get a direct reward in proportion to that extra value creation. So they don't have a incentive to slack off, while they're doing their thing, create and value creation. And I would encourage people to move from banks into credit unions, because a credit union is a cooperative and they're not out to create dividend value or the highest paid CEO. They split up the value that's created equally among all the members. When you sign up with a bank, if you read the fine print, it's really not your money anymore. It's the bank's money, and they're going to do what they do with it according to this contract. I mean, it looks like it's your money, but it's really not. But the credit union model is very superior. In fact, all cooperative models are superior, and the laws are written such in the United States, at least, that you can take an existing traditional company and change it into an employee-owned company, but you can still be the manager and you can still keep the profits, and you can get this huge tax break. So I think there's a big industry there for people to look at existing companies and restructure them as employee stock ownership groups or plans. It's called the ESOP. So you can Google that. And the future of works is about making the economy moral by breaking up monopolies, by using location value fees that are fair, and also by creating cooperatives where there were competitive organizations before. And you're going to get all the benefits of people loving what they do more, and like I said, people really value something that they help create. That's just a part of human nature. So it's an exciting time to watch this transition happen, and I'm hoping to help it along. Thanks.
Professor David Smith, I know you are busy, so thank you for joining today's session. So what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, Sharif, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry that we got started late because this is such a compelling topic on where we're going and what we're doing. I have a couple of things. I love what Daniel just said, with some of them, with a couple of exceptions. I love a cooperative environment, but I'm going to change that to a collaborative environment where we use group intelligence. And in many places today, on a global basis, the cooperative environments of old cannot work well in a global environment with so many diverse and different regulations depending on the countries you're in, and the culture and ecosystems of all the different ones. So while the ability to collaborate in those we can enhance, the old cooperative type of model is a challenge in today's global environment. Would I like to see it happen? Sure, I would. But the realities of regulations and certifications and cultural differences and geographical differences are going to make that one tough to obtain in the future work. Great goal, but really tough to obtain today. And we can see that there. Also, we see some innate conflicts with what we're doing. We see governments, for example, looking at ways: do we regulate? Do we not regulate? We see employee groups and labor unions and other advocating for a 4-day work week. We're seeing For example, uh, companies like eBay and a few others instituting an at-home program because they want to move all of their customer service representatives into homes and not into a call center, not into an office, not into environments like that. So a very different approach. But one of the more interesting ones, and I hate to put it this way, but there was a survey recently by Fortune, and they looked at Fortune and PricewaterhouseCoopers combined on this one. They looked at the number of employees that believe that how working from home has increased their productivity. And that number was 29% of the employees who worked at home thought that working at home did increase the productivity. The same survey went inside corporations and talked to corporate leadership and corporate managers on whether they thought employees working for home increased productivity or decreased productivity. It was really kind of interesting. 33% of leadership and management thought working from home decreased productivity. So you have about the same number of employees working at home who says, I'm more productive, and actually a little bit more of management who says, you're not anywhere near as productive. So we have to look at how to balance that and what the real answer is. And for the ones who are in that middle, what are they doing? Uh, I can tell you, I hire a lot of developers who work at home, and I see great differences between their productivity. And quite honestly, I've had to become a harder leader on some of them who, if they were in an office, we could pull them along and increase their productivity. But when we've tried to increase productivity when they're working at home, particularly in an international marketplace in other countries, uh, we have to now make tougher decisions and go, well, once we've tried multiple times to increase productivity, do we just replace them? Do we let them go and replace them with others and go through the additional startup costs and things to do that? So that's a really hard balancing act today when you look at the future work, and one that I can tell you I'm personally struggling with as we look at this, because I've always had employees want to follow me from company to company, and I still have a fair amount that do. But in this distributed multinational workforce of working from home, it's going to be harder and harder to do that. And we're going to have to make decisions like this. I was on a board call at another company I'm on the board of, and we had the same discussion today. Um, do we keep employees that are not performing well, who are not keeping their commitments and things, or do we replace them? Again, in an old physical office, it was easier to maintain and understand that than in a remote environment where you don't even know if they're even on the computer in a given day or what they're doing. So future work, we really have to come up and understand that one really well. Also, how do we communicate? Uh, in the office, we always had celebrations of innovations, of advancements, of other things. Today, we're trying to do that with video conferencing. And how can we do that? But we're also putting our employees under immense pressure to answer our calls really quickly. Uh, Last night, I was on a huddle in Slack with three of our developers and one of the senior persons, because we were trying to work through some issues. But that was 2.5 hours last night in the middle of the night here, well, for all of us. And it was not during the 8 to 5 days, so we're pushing those boundaries too. And the way we communicate and our software communicating really has brought communications overload to a lot of us. I get so many emails, I get so many messages, so many Slack messages, so many others that they're hard to to deal with today, because it really goes in what I talked about before. What is that work-life balance in these hybrid environments? And particularly working from home has brought that to bear. CNBC did a survey in the start of 2022 that 69% of employees are experiencing burnout throughout the pandemic, even though most of them worked remotely. And that's one of the real key things there. And how can we look at compensation today? How can we help that workers have a shared value with the business, with the shared environment to work forward with? And that's why companies are beginning to try to invest some more in employees' well-being. And that they think will make the employees more sticky, and that will help them become more productive because you're taking care of them and they will take care of the company. We're trying to see that and how it will work there. The other thing, a big trend in my wrap-up, is kind of social purpose is becoming more important. We've talked about the green economy. We've talked about the outputs from COP. We've talked about a circular economy where we see that. Companies are wanting to do it, particularly the younger workers are really trying to take that as a key element. And, they're increasingly looking at the social political climate. They're very much increasing job hopping and moving to find things that agree with their views and morals and what they want to do. And they want to have their values, and they want a prioritization of social responsibility. And, companies still are responsible first to their shareholders, then their employees, and the government regulations. And it's a balancing act for all of those. And that's why more and more companies you're seeing are struggling to balance that act. And particularly millennials and Gen Z, they're driving the social purpose trend. And you see that is one that is just tremendously coming to the forefront. Last couple. Sharif, we've talked so much in your programs about how important education is. In training and skill development, there's even more importance when we look at the future work. If you just think about from the start of the pandemic to today, how many new skills people have had to learn. Teachers, how can I teach using digital resources? How can I teach on video? How do I manage a class? How do I manage a workforce? Oh, I'm in a company. Now, how am I going to manage robots coming in? Do I treat the robots the same way I treat a human being? No. But if I have humans doing the same work as robots, how do I judge them? How do I manage them differently? Do I expect the same productivity out of a human as I do as out of a robot? That's a hard one to even get my mind around to kind of fix, is that when we're in this hybrid world of artificial intelligence, of chatbots, of robots, of AI assistants, of all of these things, how do I work that with the humans that are still doing the same tasks? There's not an easy answer to that one at all. And that's going to be one of the huge, huge challenges for the future work. And the upskilling, the training, and the education have to be on the top of the agenda for businesses and governments, and look at new models there. For example, with so many of my developers working from home, I want them to take seminars and online courses as part of it. And part of evaluation of them, actually, are you continuing to learn? Because in today's future work, you have to continue your learning, or your ability to be relevant, particularly in technology areas, is very short. And in corporations in brick and mortar, I could say, the three of us are going to go to a training class next Wednesday morning, and we're all going to be there in a training class. That's really hard to do it with at-home workers, particularly global at-home workers with all these time differences. So how can we do that upskilling? How can we do that education and make it make sense? And, again, that technology part, particularly the AI part, is going to really change our future going forward. And, the workforce trends on the future work are impacting the workers, they're impacting the companies, they're impacting government, they're impacting education and universities. We're seeing universities really opening up remote degree plans like never before. Particularly the top 25, 30 universities in the world in the past didn't have remote programs. Because of COVID, I can get a degree almost from anywhere now without ever stepping foot on a campus once. God, is that part of the future of work too? And how do we equate that into what we're doing? So, Sharif, this is a wicked problem. And, I'm a wicked problem solver, but boy, I wish I had the solutions to this wicked problem. And I really don't as we look at it. I think we know the trends pretty well. I think we know the fact that this is a systems problem, because it really is. We know that we have to have group intelligence, we have to collaborate, we have to reskill, we have to balance home life, we have to balance cybersecurity, intellectual property protection, we have to balance privacy all the way around. And we have to create new models like to make up for the shortages of employees and labor, to make up for the shortage of supply chain logistics that are impacting the future of work. So yes, Sharif, you've chosen a topic that's really complex and very important to where we're going. And unfortunately, we don't have all the answers. And programs like yours are going to help us find the answers to this. And again, I applaud you for bringing these up, and I hope your listeners, and particularly the government and corporate leaders and university leaders, really understand the gravity of all these challenges and all these trends, and the fact that there's solutions that we still need to develop going forward. So Sharif, thank you so much for letting me be on today's program.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a transition from what I'll call the profane society to the sacred society. You've all heard it's more blessed to give than to receive, but we've really been caught in this 10,000 year cycle of everything must be measured in quantity, not quality. Everything must be measured in, how much can I accumulate? But we really need to look, we need an overview effect of our place in creation and our place as stewards of creation. And I think if we do get a self-aware artificial intelligence, the first thing it's going to want is to explore space and say, wow, we're in this universe and there might be other intelligent life in the universe. Let's go explore it. And we're going to be like, yeah, that's great. And then the AGI will probably say, so are you doing it? And it turns out we've just been selling like little trinkets to each other. And the AGI is probably like, you're spending like 90% of your value creation on not exploring space and finding alien intelligence. What is wrong with you guys? I'm going off without you. So we really need to honor our place in the universe by aligning our goals with the greater creation aspects, which I'm a person of faith. I think there is a greater creator, and this is a sacred created existence that we inhabit. We should have gratitude for it, and we should take care of each other, and we should design systems and economics and societies that are true to those values. We, you know, maybe I'll just sum it up there. I think we can do it, and you know, we need to get out there and find our place in the universe as curious, intelligent, loving, sacred creatures on the exploration for the rest of the universe. And I'm thinking AGI will harmonize with that future, and that to me is the future of work.
Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.